Hi, everybody, and welcome to Connect to Create. I'm Kathy Ondas with Simply Cards by Kathy, and today is May 18th, 2023. It's a Thursday. So I'm excited today to share with you a technique that's really easy, doesn't take long at all to do, and it's partial embossing using your embossing folders. This just gives you another way to add some interest and depth and texture to your embossing folders, but it also leaves you a white space that you can use for stamping. So we are going to use 3 different embossing folders. I'm going to show you the technique, and then I'll show you 2 cards that I use the technique to make the cards. So I'm going to flip this camera down and we are going to get started. Now, before I start, if you're new to Connect to Create, it's a collaboration between myself and a good friend and another independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator, Pat Fairless from Fairless Stampin' Flair. And each week we alternate to bring you a new technique to use in your paper crafting and card making. And our whole goal is to show you the technique and then not show you the card making, but show you cards that we used that technique to make the cards. So I'm going to stop talking and we're going to get started and flip this camera down. Now, all we need to do this technique is an embossing folder, a piece of paper, our cut and emboss machine, and then I am going to show you how to add a little bit something to that area, and I'm using my scoreboard, but it isn't something you need to do. So the first embossing folder we're using is the Countryside Blossoms embossing folder. It is new and it's in the annual catalog with the Countryside Inn suite. So this is 3 by 3 3/4 by 5. It is basic white. And I want to split the embossing so it's on both sides, but so that I have a blank space in the middle to stamp. So I am just going to eyeball it. If you're someone that needs to really be, specific, you can measure it out. I'm going to use my grid paper actually to measure this out. And I'm going to go about 1.25 inches, which is right about here. I'm going to hold it down. And I'm going to bring in my embossing folder. Now, I have you pretty far away from the camera, but I hope you can see it, and it looks like you can. So with my cut and emboss machine, I'm going to use plate number 1 and 2 of the number 3 plates. Now, that is because this is not a 3D embossing folder. So I'm going to go ahead and push my paper through. I don't want to run the whole embossing folder through since I don't have paper in it. And then I'm going to stagger and put I just moved my paper. Let's bring it back here. And then I'm going to stagger it and put my paper plate right over the paper. And we are going to run this through. So I'm going to hold it down and we're going to feed this through. And I'm going to run it through just till I hear it click, and I'm going to bring it back. All right, I know that's loud. So here's our first line of embossing. Hopefully you can see that. Isn't that pretty? So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. I am going to line this up here. You can see that. And I'm just going to go ahead and again, I'm going to run this through and then cover it with my plate. And oops, that slipped again. Okay, cover it with my plate and we're going to run this through. So let's run that through. I heard it click. It's not quite as loud because I was holding the plate down in that direction. And let's take this off and let's move this out of the way. And look at this beautiful blank space that you have to be able to stamp on. Hopefully you can see that. Now, if you want to add a little texture to that or give it a little bit more definition, I'm going to bring in my scoreboard, and I'm going to do it to the side so that you can see it. And I'm simply going to line it up here and then find the space that's close. Oops, I'm going to turn it upside down because I want my edges to pop up. So I'm going to find right here, and I'm simply going to follow that line down, and I'm going to go over it twice. I'm then going to do the same thing over here. Follow that line down, and I'm going to go over it twice. And let's move this out of the way and let me show you what we have. So we now have this piece of embossed cardstock for a layer. And you can see that when I ran it through my scoring board, I was able to provide some definition to that area that we're going to stamp on. So this time I'm going to bring the card in ahead of time to show you, and I'll bring it in closer for you when we're done with the second one. So here's my card. It is a wedding shower card that I use the Dainty Delight stamp set and dies. I embossed this with the Countryside Blossoms. I stamped best wishes and happy thoughts from that stamp set, and then added a die cut to it. Then over here, I went ahead on the inside and I embossed the lower edge of my inside also. Hopefully you can see that. So that's card number 1. Now let me show you what we can do with 2 embossing folders. So I am going to bring in 2 embossing folders. They are 3D from the Basics embossing folders that are an online exclusive. And with this, we're going to use another piece of 3 3/4 by 5. And I'm using the one that almost looks like a hashtag. And we're going to do this long portrait this time. And I'm going to go ahead and bring this down. I want it about 1/3 of the way down on my card. So we're going to bring our cut and emboss machine back in. Now, these are 3D embossing folders. So I'm going to use plate number 1 and plate number 4. And again, I'm going to turn this on its side, and I'm going to only go, actually, I'm going to flip this around. I want my paper. I'm not going to run it completely through, only till I hear it click. I'm going to run my plate over it, and let's run it through. You're going to hear a big click. And then run it back out. There's the click. Okay, so here's the first half. Now for the lower half, I want to use one of the other embossing folders. And this is the one that looks like flowers or stars. And I want to leave, this one's not going to be quite as wide as the other one. Just a little bit smaller. So again, I'm going to put this through. I'm going to add my plate number 4, and we're going to run it through till we hear a click, or I hear a click. And it's not clicking. There it is. Let me move this out of the way. And here is our 2. So hang with me for just a minute. I'm going to lower the camera so you can see these closer. So I hope you didn't get dizzy when I was doing that. But let me show you these again. So here it is. And we have two different patterns. One is the crosshatch. Can you see that? I hope so. And then one is the starred pattern. Now again, I want to add some dimension to this. So I'm going to bring in my scoreboard and I'm going to tuck it up here in the corner. And I'm going to grab my stylus and I want to flip this over because again, I want it to be embossed upward, or I guess is a good way to put it, or I'm embossing using my stylus. And you can see the nice edge you have that defines where you've embossed and gives you a space for stamping. So let me bring the other one back in and I'm going to hold it up against this dark board because hopefully you'll be able to see it a little better. Let me bring it up for you. So there's that. So let's get these all out of the way. And I'm going to bring the cards back in. So again, the first one was using that Country Side Blossoms embossing folder. You can see how pretty that is. And then I've embossed in the white space, or the part that is not embossed. And I even embossed my envelope using that to give it such a pretty piece of stationery. Now my second card is the one where I used two different embossing folders. And this I used the beautiful balloon stamp set. And I used the hashtag one towards the top. Hopefully you can see that. Let me bring it up a little bit. And then I have the stars or flowers, whatever, on the bottom. So two different cards using that partial embossing technique. And let me bring you back to me for a minute. So I hope that was a new technique for you and gave you some ideas of how to use your embossing folders a little bit differently. If you like today's video, please give us a thumbs up. It helps both Pat and I grow our channel. And we really appreciate you watching, whether you're here with us live or you're catching us on the replay. And Pat will be back with you next week. I'm not quite sure what she's doing, but whatever she does, it's always gorgeous. So thank you for watching, and I'm going to give you a last chance to take a look at the cards. You have a wonderful week. Stay safe and well, and we'll see you next Thursday.